Good morning. We all know songs which speak about Jesus or God being our rock. There's the old hymn, Rock of Ages, or the more modern Songster piece which says, "When I stand on the rock, I can see more clearly. When I stand on the rock, I find peace. When I stand on the rock, I am never alone. I am always on the rock." And another one which says, "You're my rock eternal." These would all have been inspired by the Psalm 18. I love you, Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horns of my salvation, my stronghold. Well, then, of course, there's the children's chorus, which says, the wise man built his house upon the rock. Do you know it? I'm sure you do. Come along. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The wise man built his house upon the rock. The rains came down and the floods went up. Are you doing it? The rains came down and the floods went up, and the house on the rock stood firm. The foolish man built his house upon the sand. The rains came down and the floods came up, and the house upon the sand fell crash. I hope you were doing it with me. If not, you'll have to practice. Anyway, that would have come from some words of Jesus, a story which Jesus told about the wise and the foolish builders. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house, who dug down deep and laid the foundations on rock. When the flood came, the torrent struck that house, but would not shake it, because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who builds a house on the ground without the foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete. We've all built sandcastles on the beach, haven't we? As children or with children. You can build wonderful creations with turrets and moats and walls around, all sorts of beautiful things you can build in the sand. But no matter how beautiful, when the tide comes in, it will wash that sandcastle away. A couple of years ago, I was down in Cornwall with some relatives, and their two boys were building a castle, but it wasn't of sand. They built it with pebbles and small rocks, and it looked lovely. And then when the tide came in, it wasn't washed away. And it was a good reminder to us of that lovely story that Jesus told. I read about story something that happened in 1986 in the Rocky Mountains. There was a flood in which 144 people lost their lives. Studies of the area showed that the walls of the roads that had stood the storm were those that were filled with concrete. In other words, those that had a sure foundation. When we lived in Bromley, some friends of ours had a crack in their driveway which ran up to the house. On investigation, it was discovered that the crack went right into the foundations, and if there had been a serious flood, then the house would probably not have stood very securely in any case. So it was good that they were able to get out when they did. The story that Jesus tells of the wise and foolish builder makes sense, and I doubt if anybody would not believe what Jesus said. Everything that is built needs a solid foundation. It may be Lego or Jenga, a building or a tower, or perhaps a bridge, but it's all important to have the good foundation, important foundations. It's the same in our lives. As we build our lives, we need firm foundations as well. Foundations or influences that affect the rest of our lives. Perhaps from children, from their parents, at school, from friends, and at work, from colleagues, and influences and situations that we place ourselves into. All of these things come to build our lives. It's good to have good, firm foundations. As children, we haven't got much say in the matter, but as we grow older, we can choose who we have as our friends. We can choose where we go or what we do in order to have firm and secure foundations. Choosing to follow Jesus is the best choice that we can make for life. If we follow the way that he lived and his teaching, that would be a very firm foundation on which to live. Years ago, the young people often used to, who are probably grandparents by now, but they often used to wear a wristband, and on it said WWJD. Think about it. WWJD. It stood for What Would Jesus Do? And the idea was that they wore it all the time at school and wherever they went. And whenever they had to make a decision, whether a tiny one or a big one, they would look at this wristband and then think, now what would Jesus do? In this circumstances, would he go there? Would he do that? Would he say this or that? And depending on the answer as to what Jesus would do, hopefully that is what they did. When we come across difficult times, and it is when and not if, because everyone has difficult times, having Jesus in our lives will help and carry us through. We have the choice of good or bad influence throughout our lives, and it often has far-reaching consequences. My parents were Salvation Army officers. They weren't wealthy, we didn't have much money, only enough to live by, but the legacy that they left me, I consider to be far more valuable than money. They taught me, by example, to follow Jesus, rather like pouring concrete into my life, and to give me a faith and a firm foundation. That wasn't sufficient. I had to make the choice myself to accept Jesus and use him as my foundation. When we decide to follow Christ, it is up to us. It's our responsibility to show others through our lives how we should live our lives. To do everything that we can to influence others, to do what Jesus would do, to give others the best example that we can, and particularly to give our young people a good example, or new Christians, that they will learn to grow and love Jesus as their rock and their salvation. We want everybody that we know and love and meet to know and love and meet Jesus too. I pray that we will all be wise men and build our house on the rock of Jesus and the rock of God. Thank you for listening. May God bless you.
Futures in his heart.